Hi, it's Kim Boon. I just woke up and it's the morning after GE2025, and what an election of surprises. So here's a quick take on my reactions to the final results. By the way, I'll go into more in-depth into the specifics later this week as I take time to reflect on what has happened or didn't happen. So let's start with the constituencies that the Red Dot Perspective made predictions on. Overall, we managed to get half of them right. We were right about Chua Chu Kang and Punggol, while we got Tampines and West Coast-Jurong West wrong. So not too bad for a newbie political observer, but it's really the lessons rather than results that are most important to me. So let's talk about Chua Chu Kang GRC. So this was one we got right. PAP won 63.59% of the votes against the Progress Singapore Party. So this is around 5% higher than in GE2020. So two factors were at play here in my opinion. So based on historical voting pattern, I had previously said that voters preferred the familiar over the unknown. So that saw them vote for the incumbent for the past 3 elections, despite not seeing much improvement to the infrastructure of their constituency. So I went on to further hypothesize that Minister Tan See Leng's perceived unpopularity would have little effect on voters. They might even have preferred Minister Tan over DPM Gan Kim Yong, who has been there throughout because it represents a hope for something different while preserving some sort of familiarity. Another factor worth considering is that the new Chua Chu Kang voters added from former Tengah estates. So next, let's talk about Punggol GRC. So this is one that we got right in our predictions. The end result was PAP winning 55.17% of the votes, much wider than I expected. So before we go into that, let's talk about overall WP strategy. So prior to nomination day, one of the things that I discussed was whether WP was going to be aggressive or defensive in GE2025. We all know that they went with the latter, and credit to them, this resulted in a consolidation and in some cases gains in the 3 strongholds, despite the PAP registering higher mandate overall. So what I think happened is that we did not see any recognizable old guards do what Mr. Loh Tak Yang did in GE2011, leading a team anchored by a familiar face at the national level to expand their presence in Singapore. So this seems to have played out in GE2025, where the strong teams in Punggol and Tampines registered good results, even with a relative team of newcomers, and despite not having personally walked the ground for many of them prior to GE2025. To me, the difference could have been that lack of Mr. Loh Tak Yang type figure, but it also tells me that if the GE2025 teams in both constituencies continue to walk the ground over the next 5 years, there's good hope yet for the WP in these battlegrounds in the future. But back to Punggol GRC. So it appears that the PAP did stand out as many of their members were incumbents with boots on the ground for the past 5 years, especially Ms. Sun Xueling Ling. Also, another factor that could come into play was the bringing of DPM Gan Kim Yong at the last minute. I thought that his presence was a coin toss between voters feeling the negative pressure of having an important trade minister in parliament versus not caring at all for losing a minister, because it's not really the end of the world if you looked at Mr. George Yeo and Mr. Ng Chee Ming in 2011 and 2020 respectively. Turns out, trade impact on bread and butter issues seem to have played out stronger for voters. Now let's talk Tampines GRC. So this was one that I got wrong. So based on historical numbers, I put the starting point at around 50-50, and the end result was very close, with 52.02% of the votes going to PAP. So some lessons to be learned, and I'll go into more details in a subsequent video. I had quantified that there was a 15-17 premium of a top versus smaller opposition party. So let's look at the PAP results again when going up against the NSP in GE2020. At the time, they won 66.41% of the votes. This means that the GE2025 results show a 14.39 premium of WP versus NSP, much lower than anticipated. And that few percentage margin of error made all the difference in this contest. Also, the other factor that could have made a difference is one that I discussed in Punggol. If there were Pritam Singh or Silver Lim personality anchoring Punggol, similar to DPM Gan for the PAP, that few percentages difference could have been plugged. But of course, it's easy for me to say that in hindsight. Now, our last prediction was for PSP win in West Coast. The end result was PAP winning 60.01% of the votes, and that came as an absolute shocker to me. And I would think many people too. I mean, this was with the absolute best team that the PSP could muster, with Dr. Tan Chim Bok, Ms. Leong Man Wai and Ms. Hazel Phua. In G2020, the PSP managed to get 48.32% of the votes, the narrowest victory for PAP. In G2025, the gap opened by almost 12%. High level, these are my thoughts. The Taman effect of the new Jurong voters in Chua Chu Kang is real. When I quantified it in a previous video based on GE 2020 results, it would have put the PAP at a starting point of almost 58%. This is close to the actual results of 60% in GE2025. So this result could actually mean that the PSP retained their existing popularity within the West Coast voters, but they failed to gain much traction with the new additional voters from Jurong. This is a surprise to me given the level of exposure gained by Mr. Leong and Ms. Paul in Parliament. Also, I wonder how much of a factor was Dr. Tan Chin Bok in the entire calculus. Anyways, I'll digest this a little bit more and discuss in a separate video. But overall, this is an absolute shocker, and I do feel horrible for the Progress Singapore Party and wonder how this will impact the party moving forward. Alright, that's the prediction that we made for GE2025. Overall, we're 50-50 in getting things right. I don't take joy in being right or feel disheartened for being wrong, because it's the lessons rather than results that matter. And in a political contest, there's always winners and losers. And online, I'm starting to see some ugly characters, ugly conversations coming up. And I think it's important that we're able to civically and constructively understand where we have gone right or wrong. Because after all, many of you who watch this channel care for Singapore, which is why the conversations can get heated. And ultimately, we have to remember that at the end of the day, we're all Singaporeans. So that's my quick take on GE2025's predictions. What are your thoughts to what has happened in GE2025? Love to hear them in the comment section. And that's a wrap for our Red Dot Perspective today, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.